Welcome to Heads Up, the ISC research series that keeps you informed of the latest trends happening in the international schools market. Let's get started with our episode. Supporting student choice to positively impact their life and career is put under the spotlight in today's episode. We talked about the current school practices and key influences in a student's journey with guest panelists at our Edruptors School conference in June 2022. What is education truly for? Erika Elkady, secondary school head teacher at Jumeira Baccalaureate School, shared her thoughts on why it matters for students that their school helps them to find their own strengths and passions.
Of course, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of education? And it was Aristotle who back in the day was already trying to answer that question. And as I said before, I think that we have, a little bit lost the real purpose of education, which is not, preparing students for high grades or mediocre grades. The purpose of education is really to prepare students for the future and to deal with the ups and downs of life so that they can really flourish. And that they have to have experiences when they grow up where certain values may collide.
Deepa Avashia, school leader at the Riverside School, expanded on Erika's comment. She emphasised the need for school initiatives that support students in their journey of personal discovery.
But I think the biggest driver for personal discovery and change for us has been the I can mindset. The belief that children can drive the change and they don't have to be powerful and rich or old enough to do that, and they can do that right away, has resulted in not very easy decisions for them at times. But in that process, they have learned a lot about themselves, their own mindsets, about people around them. So that's really, I think, has been the biggest driver for us, for our children. In addition, of course, we have a lot of intentional processes in school, which help children explore the multiple facets of their identity. And this is through maybe a personal project or an identity curriculum or an adolescent reader, which helps them understand the quest being actually just self-awareness. Right? And finally, the desire being that at the end of 15 years of school, when they're choosing careers, hopefully they are a lot more confident about their own interests and passions. So that's, I feel that the idea of personal discovery and the different processes that we use.
Broadening student growth paths involves providing students with different options, but also shifting the entire community's mindset about the value of these options. How can school leaders encourage parents to consider alternative pathways and to value a wider range of learning routes than just those that they are familiar with? Deepa shared her views.
The parents, of course, are also very business-centric, particularly in Gujarat. So for a longest period of time, education was just a requirement, a time pass, if you might call it, for these children, because finally they knew they will enter their parents' business. And therefore, this is what they would have to do, irrespective of whatever they might want to study. So therefore, the initial 10 years of Riverside was difficult. They came from this very traditional outlook. The parents came from this traditional approach to education. And again, it took a lot of time, a lot of effort from the school to ensure that children start taking a lot more courageous choices regarding their own interests and passions. Yeah. So we did a lot with our children regarding that. Thankfully now, we don't have 30 graduates being all businessmen or pursuing business studies, but we have children who are physicists and dancers and chefs and pursuing whatever they feel. And I think that's changed the outlook of a lot of parents now. So now and today, when parents are approaching Riverside, they are coming to us knowing the varied interests that our children have and understanding that that's the way to go forward. So I think that's really why and the way that we've been able to shape and change the approach of children and parents in a place as small as Ahmedabad.
Erika explains how her school guides parents and students.
And then in our school is after, option evenings and showing parents and students what the expectations are of the diploma courses, then we decide which pathway students are going to follow. So unlike some IB schools, we don't say, oh, you start at the diploma track, and if that turns out to be too challenging, you can drop down. Because the moment you do that, then you have that one program has more value than another program. And we really don't want that. We want to take the time to get you on the right track. And that's then going to be your pathway to a university of your choice. And so that is important, that we get everybody well informed, and so that we can say with confidence to our students and their parents, you have been accepted in this program, you have been accepted in that program, and we accepted you because we are confident that you are going to be successful. And that, we really all understand very well what the purpose of education is. And that we advise parents and students in a way that the character development of the student is the most important thing. And so, as I said before, that we steer away a little bit from that it's all about the grades, because it's not. And as I said before, we have seen students end up at the same university. There is no guarantee that if you are the brightest and you have the highest marks, that you're going to end up in a job that makes you the happiest. And at the end of the day, we really need to look at, who are you? What makes you tick? And what is the best for you? Not necessarily what do your parents think is the best for you, because sometimes children are asked to live their parents' dreams, which is never a good thing to do. And that's why, we spent a lot of time with the kids and with the parents, as well as the teachers.
How can a school introduce change and support alternative pathways for its students? We asked Mariona Coderch Lopez, IB Career-Related Programme Coordinator at GEMS International School, Elkady, about introducing the IBCP and BTECs as alternative pathways.
It's the people. You have to have the right people. Starting a program like the CP, anyone who's done it will know it's an enormous amount of work. It does take convincing of a lot of different stakeholders. And so having the right people, having the right team, whether it's the teachers that are actually going to go and teach the courses, whether it's your administrators who are going to finally be the ones signing off on whatever contract you've established, you have to have the right people who believe in the project and who are ready to take on that challenge, because it's obviously different to walk into a program that's already established at a school and keep it going. That requires certain skills, but launching a program from scratch requires a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm and more hours and dedication than a program that's already established. So having the right people who believe in the program and who will sell it for you, and who will say the right things to the right students, and for the right reasons, that's going to make it successful. So for me, it's the people. Without my team, actually going and teaching the BTEC and creative media or business, or our core teachers in service and language development and PPS, and then on the flip side, having my administrators or head of school who's so passionate about the CP, all of this wouldn't have been able to happen.
We also talked to Deepa about the influence of peers and alumni on student aspirations.
Yeah, I think during the lockdown, we saw our alumni spontaneously reach out to us, and we saw them coming in with providing listening and advisory circles for our children where they needed it. They helped with mentoring for certain children regarding career choices because of the indefinite and the uncertainty that existed for these children at that point who were in grade 11 or 12. And a lot of times alumni come in, be it for explaining things to parents. So I also see that one of the questions is that how do you help parents understand that this is the right choice for your child? And I think it's important not just telling one, it can't be through just one conversation or one interaction. It is over a period of time that you build that, and you give the idea that it's finally the interests and passions of a child that should be honored, because otherwise they're not going to anyway be successful and happy, like Erika said, right? So alumni, a good way of doing that as well is when we have the alumni come in and talk to our parents and tell them, okay, this was what we were going through. This is what my parent said. This is what I'm doing at this point, and I'm very happy and very successful. And I think this is what we believe, and my experiences have been. So a lot of our alumni come and talk to the parents as well. And the Harvard study, of course, showed that the alumni had very close relationships with the teacher and the school. And I think that's a very important point, because I don't ever remember going back to my school or feeling the need to go back to my school at any point. But I have these children coming as soon as there's a opportunity and they're back in town. They're wanting to come to school to just share their experiences and talk about what's happening in school. So the sense of pride and belongingness that exists, and I think that's really what the other children see, and they become role models for everybody around to say, it's finally this community. It's not that you've left school and therefore it's been the end of it. It's this community coming back, talking about your experiences. If someone else can get ideas from that, help from it, I think that's really what we've seen from our alumni. And I think if we really work on that from the very beginning, a sense of pride and belongingness to the school for all children, that's going to play a very important role later on.
Our guests highlighted ways international schools develop structures and networks to support student pathways. What about students themselves? How can educators help them to take ownership of their own development? We discussed this with Shabbi Luthra, founder of the Learning Analytics Collaborative, Ed Fidoe, Chief Executive of the London Interdisciplinary School, and Conrad Hughes, Campus and Secondary School Principal at the International School of Geneva. Shabbi explained how data and evidence can support students through her work at the Learning Analytics Collaborative.
The LAC, or the Learning Analytics Collaborative, was formed in 2015. We visualize student learning data and help schools build a culture of data use. That's our primary goal and mission. There are about 50 schools in the collaborative, and they work together. A lot of times they share new kinds of visualizations. Any visualization created for any one school is available to everybody in the collaborative. Data belongs to the schools. In the process of building a culture of data use, we also provide a lot of PD, professional development, to schools. But our primary goal is to empower school leaders so that they can engage teachers in the kinds of data conversations and data retreats that help build that culture. It's a very important when you're trying to have a profile of a student, you're looking at multiple data points. It's not really based on one assessment that's done at the end of a semester or a quarter. So important to incorporate multiple data points and to get a complete picture of a student and their entire learning journey. The more we know about our learners, the better we can serve them and equip them with the skills that they need. And that's a critical piece. Sometimes and I'm glad to hear that we are actually having those conversations, and there are schools that are actually playing with the idea of different types of assessments. Conrad has examples and Ed has examples of those, and that's a growing number of schools. What we have to do is make sure more and more schools actually do that, to shift to a different way to look at assessment. So, but again, it's like the first step that we need to take. With that being the starting point, including more data that complements the summative assessments is essential as you design learning engagements that support developing the growth mindsets. You need data sets like SEL data, like well-being data. You have important data like the student support data, the amount of data that's collected that's around student support is tremendous. But again, looking at that data and seeing what kind of interventions are required for a child is important, and understanding what competencies need to be developed, what are the strengths, etc., that you need to focus on.
Conrad Hughes also talked about changing assessment to focus on global competencies that are essential for today's world.
The high-stakes narrowing of assessment at the end of high school casts a shadow over the student experience and teaching, which actually loses a lot of creativity and becomes a teach to the test sort of dog and pony show. There's a lot of anxiety and stress that comes with it. And we need to reform that. So on the one hand, we need assessment to be more inclusive. And by that, I mean every star can shine, not just the ones that are good at test taking, essay writing, and commentary writing. We need assessments that are speaking to human flourishing and what it actually means to be competent in a number of different domains. So the UNESCO International Bureau of Education global competences that we're looking at in my school are lifelong learning, self-agency, interacting with others, interacting with diverse tools and resources, interacting with the world, transdisciplinarity, and multiliterateness. There is still that academic strain in there. So a much broader and inclusive manner of assessing students. That's the first thing we want to do. The next thing is just to know students better. It's not just about assessing what they can do in those areas. So it's about being more inclusive, letting every star shine, and knowing the students better, and really looking at the end of high school as a place where students can bring to the end of school assessment the full picture of who they are.
The Learning Analytics Collaborative is developing new tools to empower students in their journey. Shabbi shared some details with us.
So one of the things that we're actually launching this fall is student access to their own profiles, because this is their data. And so it's important to kind of give them the access and also help them develop personal responsibility for their own growth. You can't have conversations about growth without the learner being engaged in it. It's like me participating in a conversation without actually being able to see what my pattern of growth has been, or at least me taking ownership of it. And also increasing a student voice in any kind of data discussions that are happening in schools is kind of a natural progression, and it's a growing trend. And it also means that you can have students then learning to set their own goals. You can have them recognize their strengths, advocate for the kind of support that they want. Providing them that access is critical for scaffolding any kind of data conversations. They have to be equal partners in that learning. It has to be at the same level almost. So yeah, that's what the LAC is doing. We're actually opening that access and to both parents and students, so that they can see the growth and they can also take ownership.
Alternative pathways and new approaches to learning have emerged within higher education too. Some universities and colleges have recently opened, promoting a new approach. Ed Fidoe, Chief Executive of the London Interdisciplinary School, shared one example.
For the London Interdisciplinary School, and we can just call it LIS for ease, I was the co-founder of School 21. School 21 was all about trying to create an education that was broader than just getting young people ready for exams. So we have a big focus on oracy, speaking skills, project-based learning and well-being. And then now we've started LIS, which is the first new university that has opened with its own degree awarding powers in the UK since the 1960s. And it's an interdisciplinary degree that's organised around complex problems. And we're here in Whitechapel in East London. Well, I'll start with how we admit students, which is one of the major things that we do differently. And the way we do admissions is that everybody can apply, even if you have no A-levels or that level of qualification. But we have an interview, 2 interviews. One of them is around your mindsets. So it's kind of, do you understand the course, first of all? But also we test for curiosity. We test for self-awareness. Those are things we found we can actually test for in an interview. We used to test for teamwork and resilience, and we found we couldn't test for that particularly particularly useful way. So we test for curiosity and self-awareness, and we also do an academic interview to test their thinking ability and their problem solving, because we want to make sure they can be successful on an academic course. But once we've done that, that puts us in a place to take some really big bets. And this year we have, I think, the most academically diverse group of students, certainly in the UK, possibly the world, because we have people who've got 4 A stars at A level, students who have dropped out after 1 year of Oxford or Imperial College to come to us. And we have some students who have a much lower collection of grades. We've got a student who's been in prison recently. We've got students who dropped out of sixth form with no A-levels at all. So they're all on the same program. They're all in the same classes. And this year so far, they've all thrived. We have 64 of our 65 founding cohorts still with us. Now, that's not been easy. It's particularly difficult to teach mathematical subjects to such a broad range of capabilities. But we're trying to do it, and we think it's important, and the students love it. Saying to us, please don't go back at any point to just taking people with perfect A-level grades. We just won't have the diversity. And these are students telling me this who have got perfect A-level grades. They don't just want to be lumped in with this narrow group. They can see that there's no diversity there. So first of all, so that's an inclusive admissions process, but then we have to be inclusive on the degree. And we have various different ways of doing that, different kinds of teaching pedagogies. The students work in teams a lot of the time, so we have to get good at group assessment, and we have a very broad range of assessments. The one assessment we don't have is high stakes, in silence, end of year exams, because we just actually, when we looked at it, thought, what is actually that good for testing for? And we decided not to do any of that. But we do have lots of assessments. Assessments are good. Formative assessments are particularly good. Summative assessments are important. You need to know where students are at. But there's a range of things, and sometimes they even have a choice. So they might be able to choose to create a podcast as part of their product, or they might be able to choose to create a video or a report. And they don't always have that choice, but sometimes for their end of year project, they have that kind of a choice. And it's both great because they're creating a product that has value, and also they can kind of gravitate towards the thing that they feel most comfortable with.
Ed suggested a way for schools to foster students' interests and passions whilst preparing them for the future.
So we have to think about different destinations. I'm not just saying this because we've created one, different pathways. And as soon as teachers start to talk to students about the myriad of different possibilities, it actually starts with really helping them understand the different kinds of jobs they might do. And I think we can be confident about that. I mean, okay, there's lots of jobs that we don't know that are not invented yet, but there's lots of jobs that exist right now that people don't really understand, students. So it's not just the professions like being a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or a policeman. These are professions which students understand because they see them on television a lot. We've got to talk to them about the other ones, that there's so many other different kinds of jobs, often that are around things like sustainability or environment or inequality, which students are really passionate about. So get them excited about that, get them thinking differently about how they're going to build up their capabilities to have a career in that area. And then it enables you then to be a bit more innovative in the provision, I think.
All the initiatives we've presented shed light on different ways to assess student performance. But is it possible for international schools to shift the idea of what success means for their whole community? Shabbi suggested an approach for school leaders to align assessment practices more strategically.
So it's a question of whether you're going to look at only academic pieces or a range of different. It's a question of, as a school, identifying what are the 5 or 10 things that you're going to focus on. And then which of those aspects require personalized assessment and which of those require more of a standardized assessment. So I think it's going to be fascinating as schools are having these conversations.
Conrad referred to some of his work with the Coalition to Honour All Learning, which is sharing an alternative way forward to define student success. The coalition originated from a group of schools who believe that current end-of-school metrics do not accommodate for the varied learning journeys of students. This expanding group of schools and universities is collaborating to adapt assessments so that schools can embrace more holistic learning avenues.
So what we're trying to do is really federate a group of educational institutions to change the way that we're assessing students, and not just to be passive recipients of the situation that we're in, but to actually push for change. And so we do this by collaborating and discussing what alternative methods are out there. We survey universities to see if they are aware of these alternative transcripts that are out there. We share best practice so that we can influence each other and develop more alternative transcripts. I think a head of school, especially in secondary school in the 21st century, has to have as a North Star, as a lodestar somewhere in their worldview, the broadening of assessment. Because you talk about inclusivity, you talk about human flourishing, about 21st century skills. We prefer the term competences. Competence is broader than a skill. You have to do something about it. So that's what we're about. We're really about sharing practice, networking, influencing change to broaden transcripts. If we're looking at human flourishing at the whole child, it's celebrating the whole person. Clearly what happens in the school, the culture of the school, the activities, what's on offer, the clubs that students run or get involved in, all of that is building up the child's character. And we mustn't forget that. Schools are wonderful places. We sometimes attack schools, and they're a bit of a soft target because of societal issues that are coming into schools and are sometimes filtered by schools. The school is still a sanctuary of community, of personal growth. It's a wonderful institution. So, we mustn't give up on the idea of educating the whole person. A lot of it happens informally through extracurriculars, through constructs that have been described through time as kind of add-ons, and they're not reflected in the transcript. So you get what's a sort of schizophrenic situation where we say, well, listen, communication, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, these are really important. They will be embedded in some way, shape, or form in the assessments that you do. What we've developed is a learner passport. There's a portfolio function, up to 4 pieces of work that a student has chosen that he, she, or they are proud of, so that you can see those. A radial graph that describes competences that have been stacked in those 7 global areas that I described earlier, extracurricular and formal curriculum related. A personal statement by the student, and some qualitative information on what they've done. For example, their extended essay title. This gives you a much richer view of the student. And the reason why we have to start giving it to universities without them asking for it, alongside a traditional transcript, is because we're not going to change things if we don't do that. If you're waiting for it to happen at some sort of, airy level, where universities and examination boards are going to come together and change the assessment system, you're going to have a long wait. It's going to be many generations of children who aren't going to live through that. So we've started doing that at my school, and we've designed this passport. We did it collaboratively. It's been a long haul. We want to make it a learning commons available to any school that's interested in using it. It's a way of knowing what the student does, because it forces you to find out more about what they do outside of school, and really who they are. And that's got to be a good thing, knowing the student. It celebrates all kinds of learning and not just narrow academic transcripts. And it educates universities on what we as schools think is important and what in fact they'd like to see. But it does it in a visual and concise manner that allows them in that precious 8 minutes to see much more than they would wading through numbers and sort of standardized personal statements. Schools can join our coalition if they're interested. That's a concrete step you can take to see how these alternative transcripts are taking foot. We criticize education for being clunky and slow moving and not keeping up with other industries, but there's a reason for that. It's because of all the pressure points, the engagement of stakeholders, and the risks. So it's very delicate, but we've got to move it along. And I think that by designing an alternative transcript that celebrates what learners can do and accompanies a formal transcript, you're doing the right thing. But you have to do it well, you have to do it carefully, and it must not become more work for the student. And that's a whole other story.
Our panelists have discussed ways to foster student individuality, including ways to assess their performance. What if it moved entirely away from standardised tests? Let's conclude this episode with a thought-provoking message from Ed Fidoe.
And I think we need to finally separate out how we assess schools with what universities want to see or with what employers want to see. It just shouldn't be the same tests and measures. And so we've got to find ways of assessing schools. And if there might be a way of assessing a school, which is how good is their personalized assessment of students or personalized learning of students, that's a way of assessing school. It doesn't involve standardized tests.
For more information about Heads Up, including access to previous episodes, please visit iscforschools.com/headsup. Until next time.